And welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Podcast. We've done a couple of Zooms with you guys over the past couple of weeks since the beginning of this novel coronavirus. We are back. We're not in the booth today. We're going to be trying something a little new. We're going to be operating out of my office, get a little more room, a little bit of social distancing. Today, we are here with Superintendent Joe Murphy. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Good afternoon. And we're going to be talking about a couple of things that have come through in terms of federal assistance and some good news in terms of graduations, which has been a very popular announcement that you guys made recently. So first, I want to get into just a little bit real quick of background. During this, I guess you can say, pandemic, there was a survey sent out. And one of the things that kind of came out of your responses to the survey was that while there was a large percentage of students and teachers and that sort of thing who could participate from home, there was also a pretty significant percentage who could not. And that, of course, has been a big name of the game during this, school by school. And you and I talked about that in an interview. Feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? And I want you to talk a little bit about that survey just briefly.
Yeah, McHugh, we conducted that survey to try to get a good sampling of where we're at from a technology perspective across our parish, and that's reaching into the deepest recesses of our parish everywhere. And if I'm not mistaken, that survey returned with about 28% of our students who, for one reason or another, lacked internet access. So one of the major things that we're focusing on, that we have been focusing on during the month of May, and of course moving forward, is how do we provide access to those students most in need? And through several different processes, we're looking at ways of extending our reach and our range on our network, into our communities, onto our schools, and into the places where connectivity is a real issue. So that is a huge focal point. And of course, that kind of leads me to the CARE Act, which that we recently received, and our portion of the CARE Act here in Livingston Parish was about $4.4 million. So the bulk of that money has three priorities attached to it. And by the way, this is a grant. Mm-hmm. It's not like we could just go out and do what we want. We had to meet the domains and the priorities within the grant. When we broke that down, we automatically knew that the bulk of that money would be spent for technology resources. And access is probably one of the most difficult things for us to obtain, where we're sure we got really good saturation and we're reaching all our children in our parish.
So, and part of that survey, backing up a little bit, did include, kids with phones, kids that had computers, kids that had internet access. So when you're talking about connectivity, you're talking about the implements of connectivity, or are you talking about internet itself, or are you talking about both?
Well, we can talk a little bit about both. First of all, let me say this. One of the main priorities within the CARE Act grant was to provide one-to-one student devices. I can tell you we're going to meet that, and we're going to exceed that.
Okay.
We're going to have our schools where if the governor decides to close our schools, if we had to hand a computer to every child who's enrolled in our schools, when that happens, we're going to be able to do that. Through the CARE Act funding, we're able to purchase a significant amount of devices. We'll also purchase a significant amount, and this kind of goes to the connectivity piece. We already have purchased several access points. We're going to fix those to permanent structures throughout our communities so that our network is increased in those areas and people can connect through our network through those access points. And we've also purchased a large sum of hotspots, where if I have a student who does have internet access, but the internet access in their home is poor, we would be able to give them a hotspot and they would be able to connect. So you can see there's two caveats we're meeting here. First of all, devices, I really don't think we have an issue meeting that criteria whatsoever. As a matter of fact, we're going to be at a better than a one-to-one ratio when we get through with this, which kind of leads into the other portion that I'd like to talk about today. Now, the connectivity piece is a much more complex piece. Mm-hmm. And, the third thing in connectivity I really didn't talk about is there are several internet providers out there that are offering deals for connectivities in homes. And I will tell you, we will look at partnering with some of those entities, Cox Cable, Spectrum, or whoever might be the internet provider. And if we can, we'll see if we can enter into a partnership with them and provide that child that's enrolled in our school with some internet access itself. Now, we'll admit that part is a last resort. We're going to go to the access points. We're going to go to the hot spots. We're going to hand them devices. And then at the last step, we would look at partnership to actually provide internet access in homes.
So tell us a little bit about the devices. Let's start there real quick. Is that like checking out a library book?
We are developing a form right now. As a matter of fact, and I know I'm a little bit off topic here, we're starting our summer enrichment program tomorrow.
Right.
The instruction actually starts tomorrow. We sent out a survey to those children enrolled in that summer enrichment program, and we said, do you have a device? If that child answered no, we have a form that the parent signs with some criteria on it, and we actually have handed some computers to some kids this summer already. The device itself is the very same student device we've been buying for the last 3 or 4 years. And we're really excited about that because we know what the reliability is there. We know how it functions. We know it supports what we do in our schools. So we're able to provide that child not with some device that's useless, but with a device that we know will meet the criteria we need for our continuous learning.
So, and continuous learning, that's a good way to put it. Want to ask real quick before we jump into, I think would be the other prong of continuous learning, which is the summer school offerings and the summer enrichment program. Want to ask, the access points that you said are affixed to permanent buildings, will those be partnerships with local businesses? How do you intend to do that?
Yes, that's exactly right. McHugh, we're going to enter into what we call an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, and that could be a church, a store, some civic organization somewhere. I'll just throw one out that comes to mind immediately. The VFW halls, possibly where there's large parking areas. I know that's not optimal, but our plan is on those access points to go ahead and affix those access points to the outer buildings on our campuses, and then partner with other community members to allow us to provide access points there. So if a student just absolutely has to, they can go there and they can get their continuous learning done nonstop.
There you go. So with regard to continuous learning, you already mentioned the enrichment program. We're recording this on May 27th, going to get it out this evening. Hopefully some people, when you hear tomorrow, that means May 28th. So let's talk about that. Now, this is English and math, correct?
It is English and math, McHugh. This enrichment program is something we've never done before in our parish. And the way it came about was we realized that when you take kids out of school for 8 weeks, there's some learning gaps that happen there.
Sure.
And our intention in our enrichment program is to cover those learning gaps that those children might have before they return to our campus on August 7th. So the enrichment program was designed around some criteria, and I will tell you these figures. We're serving over 1,450 students in the enrichment and remediation program, which is kind of it's the same, but it's a separate purpose on the remediation program. Okay. We've got 1,450 students. We've got 110 teachers and 220 classrooms right now that will kick off instruction. That would be tomorrow, Friday, May 28th. And that instruction will go for 17 days. And there will be 3 hours worth of instruction daily in our summer enrichment program. And yes, it is English and math. Some students qualified for English, some students qualified for math, and some students qualified for both. And what we found is the best way to do this is we're breaking it into an hour and 30-minute sessions. Because I'm telling you, if you think you're going to get a first grader to sit there for 3 hours at a time, well, that's not happening.
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But we felt like we needed to set some parameters for expectations of what this looks like. So there'll be a morning session, an hour and a half, and an afternoon session, an hour and a half. Right. So there's 3 hours of daily instruction, and that will go on for 17 days. But if I may, we want that instruction to be meaningful. We want our teachers to give feedback. And does everybody understand one of the main tenets behind what we're doing this summer prepares us better for the next school year? We've never done this summer enrichment program K to 8. Well, now we're developing a template to follow in case we're faced with another school closure next year. And while we want the instruction to address the learning gaps and bring those children up to speed, we're also using this to figure out, okay, this works real well. Okay, this doesn't work real well.
Right.
So we're preparing, and you got to understand now I've got 110 teachers who, if they went into school next year and there's somebody there that doesn't know how to do this, those 110 teachers can help lead our schools to where we can have continuous learning, no matter the circumstance.
Will this is all going to be occurring on campus, or is this going to be distance learning?
This is all virtual.
All virtual.
Every bit of it's virtual. We use several different, I will tell you, Google Classroom is probably the platform that most of our schools use to create these lessons in. And then we use Zoom for the feedback portion between the teacher and the student. Now, the real key to learning is not putting it out on a platform or a program. The real key to learning is the communication between the teacher and the student. So there is a huge, huge feedback component this summer in the enrichment program and the remediation program between the teacher and the kids. Learning can only occur if you're telling children, here's what's right and here's what you need to work on. That's when learning occurs.
Right. So when we're talking about, interaction between student and teacher and continuous learning, will there be a summer school portion of the summer? Like, will summer school be offered at all? Or will it just be this?
This is our offering for summer school. Now, let's be clear on something. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking about K to 8.
Right.
9 to 11, we have a summer credit recovery program.
Okay.
And that's for kids who need to make up credit. We're running that too this summer. We just closed out for this year in credit recovery, but in the month of July, we will offer some sessions, grades 9 through 11, for children to make up some work that they need to make up, and we refer to that as credit recovery. Now, we've been doing that for years.
Right.
That is the same process we followed.
Is that going to be kind of a virtual deal as well over Google Classroom?
Yes, it will be. They're probably at the 9 to 11 level, we'll probably focus on Plato. Okay. That is our learning program for credit recovery during the year.
Okay.
Our schools offer that on site, and we offer it out at our office or in other locations. So they will probably focus on the Plato end. That curriculum's already built. Everything's there. Here's one little bit of difference, though. In the credit recovery, we have to issue a proficiency exam at the end of instruction. Children will have to come on site and take those proficiency exams in credit recovery. But of course, we would be within all the guidelines when we do that.
Let's talk about that. So, one of the interesting things that has come around, and want to pull a lot of this together before we get to that last little bit of good news situations. It's been sort of the talk of social media at the moment. I know you've gotten a lot about it, but CDC released guidelines. I want to put the emphasis on that word about how schools should operate, and in their, I guess you could say, opinion, or based on the facts that they've pulled together. One of the things that you've talked about several times is continuous learning, teacher and student interaction. Now we're talking about best practices and CDC guidelines. A lot of this y'all are trying to pull together from next year, but before we even get into that, one of the things that you wanted to say is that, these are guidelines. They're not rules. The governor makes those, and through the Department of Education. So talk to us a little bit about, your feelings on the guidelines, and then about how, you and I sort of went through this before we started, what, when you have to constantly adjust your process, because proclamations change things and, that y'all don't get everything before everybody else and y'all are ready to go when it comes out. There's a process there. So tell us a little bit about your feelings about the guidelines and how y'all are preparing for next year, as well as, sort of how y'all get together at the central office and then, prepare for these proclamations and then have to change once they come out.
One of the greatest things that we have to overcome is misconceptions about what the requirements are at the time. And as you know, and we had this discussion before we even started today, when we were dismissed from school on March 13th, we had to follow the proclamation that was issued as a stay-at-home order. The way we've progressed through all this is we watch for those proclamations as they come out. CDC is very important. We take those guidelines very seriously, and we're going to try to stick to those guidelines as closely as we can. However, you've already made the point. Those are guidelines. What we really live and die off of are the governor's proclamations. And we go through those proclamations. And this is what we've been doing since March. And just to be honest, I'm not going to change tack now. We're going to continue to watch those proclamations. And yes, do we have to adjust and reassess after every proclamation? We certainly do. Now, right now, we're in phase 1. We are certainly looking forward to possibly going to phase 2 on June 5th. And we're even more looking forward to possibly going to phase 3 on June 26th. All those dates and all those proclamations weigh very heavily on the things that we prepare for. When we get those proclamations, we meet as a team at the central office. We go through the proclamations. We look at what they say. We say, how can we adjust to meet the parameters within those proclamations? Once we come together as a team, do that, we disseminate that information to our principals and to our board members also, because I know our board members are the ones out there having to answer calls, or why are they doing this like this? Why are they doing it like that?
Right.
We're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can with the processes and things that we're doing. And I'm just going to be honest, we're certainly going to continue to do that throughout the summer. And as we look to next year, we're going to plan for multiple contingencies, but I will tell you that we are planning on having school on August the 7th. And we're going to work in every vein possible for us to have our children on campus. If that becomes impossible due to whatever the circumstances, our continuous learning program that we developed in the month of May, that we're developing through the summer, we'll continue that continuous learning process into the next school year. And I'm just like every parent out there, I want your kids back on campus too. So please don't say that we don't. Our greatest wish is in August 7th, those 300 yellow buses start rolling up and our children get off our buses and our teachers are with our kids and we are doing what we do in Livingston Parish in education, and that's making a difference every day. But we can still do that if our children are not there. I wished I had a crystal ball to tell me exactly what August is going to look like. But I think as we go through this, the guidance and the information we get has been pretty good. Mm-hmm. And it's given us some time to think about some of the things we're doing. So if everybody wants me to sit here and say, oh, we're going to be in school with your children August 7th, I probably can't say that, but I will tell you that we will make every effort humanly possible within reason for that to happen.
So we're talking about continuous meetings with your staff at the central office and that kind of thing. Let's wrap this up with some good news. Y'all announced last week that graduations are going to happen. You got 9 high schools. Your 3 5A schools are going to do them on the fields, weather permitting. And then you've got Moorepaw and French Settlement that are going to do it at home. Everybody else is going to use the Walker High Gym. 2,200 capacity. Y'all are looking at 50% of that, so 1,100 total. Let's just start with, what was it like to be able to sit down and say, this is kind of what we're looking at this date. Let's start talking about how to do graduations. I mean, that had to have been a good feeling, especially considering the back and forth y'all had the months prior.
It's wonderful. They've done some amazing things. But I want to tell you, we've been committed since pretty much day one as to seeing how we could bring our kids back to campus. I think the turning point on graduations, McHugh, was when Louisiana entered phase one and entered a 25% occupancy rating. Now, at 25%, if you've got a facility that holds 2,200 people, that's 500 people, a little more than 500 people that you can put in that facility. And our goal was maybe more than having enough public access. We really, really think this 2020 graduating class deserved to be together one more time for their graduation. And I can tell you, we've been patient. We followed the same process on announcing graduation that we have of everything else. We've taken the proclamations, we looked at them, we looked at what we think the next one would be, and we made decisions based on that. Last week, when we entered phase one on May 18th, we began to seriously discuss what graduations look like, because we felt like we could do it then. And we are so excited to be able to bring our class back together. Walker High Gym was chosen for a couple reasons. Number one, you've already mentioned occupancy. But Walker High also has the ability not only to live stream it, our graduations for the schools that will be there will also be telecast on Cox Cable, and it will be telecast on E-Tail. So the public will get to see what we're doing too. And I am so excited about some of the things our principals are getting ready to do for our graduation. And yeah, the big three, the big 5A schools, we're going to do them on the field. Of course, that's subject to weather. We'll have to spread out. But we really wanted our kids back on campus. And that's why we've waited until now to make those.
And again, you did wait. You were waiting for those dates and some of the announcements to come, but they did come. And, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the month of June. But of course, graduations do not start until late June, run into early July. Let's hope for good weather for those dates. No. Well, yeah, it is supposed to rain here in just a little bit. But as we discussed beforehand, too, let's keep our fingers crossed for a good launch here between NASA and SpaceX. That's coming up in about 10 minutes. So that'll be interesting to see. Once again, joined today by Superintendent Joe Murphy. We always appreciate your time, sir. Had a bunch of good announcements come out last week. Wanted to come sit down and talk. Hope your back feels better.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I'm getting better.
And again, thank you for joining us. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys watching and joining us today to hear about the good news coming out of the schools and how they are preparing to educate kids however they need to do that based on the situation provided by COVID-19. We are moving back into getting into these one-on-one interviews again, which is great news for us here at the Livingston Parish News. I want to remind folks we are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We are once a week in print on Thursdays at $7 a month. We are also online at www.livingstonparishnews.com. These podcasts are free and have their own page. We do hope you all have a great day, and we'll catch you with our next interview.